The wind is cutting through you, temperature dropping fast. You can't feel your fingers anymore. The sky above is a flat, iron gray that hasn't broken in weeks. The ground beneath your feet is frozen solid, cracked like old pottery, buried under a sheet of ice that stretches as far as any living human has ever walked. You have no shelter. Nothing but animal skin draped around your shoulders and a fire that keeps going out. It is 25,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum, and most of the northern hemisphere is dying. Mammoths are pushing south. Rivers have stopped moving. The forests you hunted through 2 generations ago are gone, buried, replaced by open tundra that offers nowhere to hide and nothing to eat. Half the humans alive right now will be dead within a decade. And the ones who survive will do it through something no glacier, no predator, no extinction event has ever been able to stop. Here's what people get wrong about the ice ages. They think cold was the enemy. It wasn't. Cold was just the stage. The real threat was everything cold brought with it. Starvation, habitat collapse, population fragmentation. When temperatures dropped 10 degrees Celsius globally, the ecosystems humans depended on didn't slowly shift. They shattered. Entire prey populations migrated or vanished. And the humans who had built their entire survival strategy around those prey populations had maybe 1 generation to adapt. Most didn't make it. Genetic studies of modern humans reveal something startling. At certain points in our prehistory, the total breeding population of Homo sapiens may have dropped as low as 1,000 individuals, 1,000 people. The entire future of our species hanging on a group that could fit inside a single modern apartment building. Let's be clear about what survival actually required. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't raw toughness. It was heat management. The human body loses core temperature fast in sub-zero conditions. At -10 Celsius with wind, exposed skin begins losing sensation within minutes. Hypothermia sets in within hours. The first humans to push into glaciated Europe weren't equipped with anything resembling modern cold weather gear. They had scraped hides, crude needles carved from bone, sinew thread. But those tools were revolutionary. A fitted garment, one sewn specifically to the body, traps a layer of warm air. That trapped layer is the difference between surviving a night at -20 and dying before dawn. Archaeologists have found bone needles in Siberia dating back 50,000 years. Thin, precisely made, with a drilled eye. These weren't accidental artifacts. Someone sat down and engineered a solution to freezing to death. That's what humans were doing while the world turned to ice. Shelter was the second problem, and the solutions were extraordinary. In Ukraine and the Czech Republic, archaeologists have found structures built entirely from mammoth bones. Dozens of individual bones arranged into domed frameworks, interlocked at the joints. Mammoth skulls used as anchors, ribs curved upward to form the walls. These weren't improvised windbreaks. They were engineered dwellings, some of them with multiple rooms and central hearths. The largest sites show signs of repeated occupation, meaning these structures weren't abandoned after a single season. People came back, maintained them, treated them as permanent homes in the middle of landscapes that barely supported life. Humans looked at a pile of bones and saw architecture. Food storage was something no other species on Earth had figured out. A pack of dire wolves ate when they killed and starved when they didn't. A cave lion had no mechanism for storing excess. But humans in northern Siberia during the last glacial maximum were using permafrost as a freezer. Meat cached underground in frozen pits. Fat preserved organs. Dried, wind-cured strips of protein that lasted months. This meant a single successful mammoth hunt in autumn could carry a group of 20 people through the deepest part of winter. The hunt didn't need to happen in January when travel was dangerous and prey was scarce. The work happened in fall, and the calories were banked. That logic sounds simple. It wasn't. No other predator on the planet operated on a timeline longer than the immediate moment. We were planning seasons ahead. The Neanderthals had survived ice ages too. They lasted through brutal cold for hundreds of thousands of years. Stocky builds, massive nasal passages warming cold air before it hit the lungs, incredibly powerful muscles that generated body heat. They were built for the cold in a way Homo sapiens simply wasn't. And yet around 40,000 years ago, as modern humans pushed into Europe, Neanderthal populations began collapsing. Gone from the Iberian Peninsula by 37,000 years ago. Gone from everywhere by 28,000 years ago. The question of why still drives serious scientific argument. But here's what the evidence keeps pointing to. Neanderthals hunted alone or in very small groups. Ambush hunters. They closed the distance and killed at close range, leaving fracture patterns on their bones that match rodeo riders and rugby players. Violent, effective, brutally efficient. But it required proximity, and proximity to a wounded cave bear or a cornered woolly rhinoceros was occasionally fatal. Homo sapiens were hunting at distance with thrown spears and coordinated group strategies. Fewer injuries, lower mortality per hunt. Over decades, that math compounds into a catastrophic survival advantage. Social networks were the infrastructure that made everything else possible. By 30,000 years ago, there is clear archaeological evidence of exchange systems spanning hundreds of kilometers. Baltic amber found in southern France, Mediterranean shells appearing in sites deep in Central Europe, flint from specific quarries distributed across vast territories. These weren't accidental movements. They were trade, and trade meant trust. Neighboring populations that seldom encountered one another directly maintained relationships, shared resources, exchanged information. A group wiped out by a harsh winter in one valley didn't necessarily mean that knowledge died with them. If they'd traded, visited, married into neighboring groups, what they knew persisted. Information became its own survival mechanism. Art was part of this. The cave paintings of Lascaux and Altamira, the carved Venus figurines found from France to Siberia, the bone flutes producing actual music, these weren't decoration. They were memory systems, communication tools, social bonding mechanisms. A group that shared symbolic language, shared stories, shared ritual, held together under pressure in ways that purely practical relationships couldn't manage. The caves at Chauvet in France show paintings created by multiple artists over thousands of years. Different hands, different generations, returning to the same space, adding to the same record. Someone 32,000 years ago was maintaining a tradition started by people who had been dead for centuries. That's not animal behavior. That's civilization in its earliest form. Population bottlenecks left marks that modern genetics can still read. The Toba supervolcanic eruption 74,000 years ago in Sumatra ejected enough ash to block sunlight for years. Temperatures plummeted globally. Plant life collapsed. The prey animals that ate plants collapsed with them. Genetic diversity in modern humans suggests our ancestors passed through an extraordinary population squeeze around this time. Perhaps only a few thousand individuals survived worldwide, maybe fewer. That near extinction shaped us genetically. The immune system variants we carry, the slight differences in how modern human populations handle certain diseases, some of it traces back to whoever happened to survive that particular catastrophe. We are, in part, descended from a handful of people who got lucky in the worst years the planet had seen in millennia. And then there was the Younger Dryas. 12,000 years ago, the climate had been warming after the peak of the Last Glacial Maximum. Ice sheets retreating, megafauna declining, human populations expanding into new territories. Then it stopped. A massive cold reversal struck, probably triggered by a flood of glacial meltwater disrupting ocean circulation in the North Atlantic. Temperatures in Greenland dropped 15 degrees Celsius in a decade. The warming that had been happening for thousands of years reversed almost overnight in geological terms. The Younger Dryas lasted 1,200 years. Everything that had been recovering contracted again. But human populations didn't collapse the way they had in earlier cold periods. The tools were better. The social networks were more extensive. The knowledge base was deeper. By this point, humans had accumulated tens of thousands of years of solutions to cold. The Younger Dryas was brutal, but it wasn't new. And the difference between a crisis that kills a species and a crisis that merely reshapes it is whether that species has encountered something like it before. The end of the last ice age, roughly 11,700 years ago, opened a window. Temperatures rose. Ice sheets retreated. River systems reformed. And humans, who had spent tens of thousands of years learning to survive in the hardest conditions the planet had available, moved into a warmer world, carrying every adaptation the cold had forced them to develop. Agriculture didn't appear because humans suddenly became clever. It appeared because the climate stabilized enough for planted crops to actually grow and be harvested in the same location year after year. The social structures that had kept small bands alive through glacial winters were already sophisticated enough to organize the labor of farming communities. The knowledge networks that had spread tool designs across continents began spreading seed varieties and cultivation techniques instead. The ice ages didn't just test human survival, they built human capacity. Every group that made it through a glacial maximum had done so by solving problems no previous generation had fully solved. Insulation, fuel management, food storage, long-range cooperation, the ability to model future conditions and prepare for them before they arrived. These weren't instincts. They were learned, refined, transmitted, and added to across thousands of generations. The predators we shared the planet